fun things about being a pastor, being a teacher, is that every once in a while when you get up and you share something from the Word, um, it doesn't happen too often, but every once in a while somebody comes up and says, I can't believe that you didn't say this about that particular passage. And it's like, oh, great, yeah, you're right, I should have said that. I missed that. That does happen from time to time. Well, this last week, none of y'all did that, but I did that to myself. I got to reading with somebody last week, and I realized, like, oh man, I cannot believe I did not make this connection from this passage that I shared. I missed a big one from Isaiah 25, and it's this one from 25 verse 6. Do y'all remember talking about this passage? On this mountain, Adonai Tzavaot will prepare a lavish banquet for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, of rich food, of choice marrow, of aged wine well refined. This is a passage is talking about that time of the Messianic era when the mountain of Adonai is exalted above all the other mountains, when there is the one king, seated on the throne in glory. Well, this is one of those passages that establishes the belief among the Jewish people that in that Messianic era, that it is the Messiah who provides the best, right? He provides the banquet, because is this expectation and this hope that all God's people will be gathered together and basically share a feast, share a table. There will be this great banquet at the Messianic era. And you see a glimpse of that in Matthew chapter 8, verse 11. He says, "Moreover, I tell you that many will come from the east and the west, and they will recline at table with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven." Right? So reclining at the table, that gives a suggestion of which one of the feast days. It suggests Passover is that when they're reclining at the table. But if nothing else, it's because that's on the night that, why do we on this night recline rather than stand? Y'all remember all that? But if nothing else, it's a suggestion of one of the feasts, one of the celebrations. But the dream of the Jewish people on that day was to one day share a table at a banquet or a feast day with the patriarchs. Right? And I hope that's a desire for each one of you as well. We should be looking forward not only to being with our Messiah, but seeing these great examples of faith that existed in the Old Testament, because there's a lot more than two of them. See these great examples of faith and talk to them about what it was like to walk with Him. We're celebrating and sharing that table with these men and women whom we think are long gone. But as Yeshua talked about, God is, after all, He's the God of the living and not the dead. So that day that we are able to enjoy that moment, that's when the awakening blast has been sounded. That's this Messianic era. And so this great banquet hosted by Messiah, where He provides the best wine and the best food, is what hit me hard. And I was reading to somebody John chapter 2. This is, on the third day there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and Yeshua's mother was there. And Yeshua and His disciples were also invited to the wedding. So that's one way that we know it was not His wedding, because you don't need an invitation to your own wedding, right? It says, when the wine ran out, Yeshua's mother said to Him, "They don't have any wine." And Yeshua said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with you and me? My hour has not yet come." Right? Clearly Yeshua's mother, we grew up calling her Mary or Miriam. She wanted Yeshua to do something about this situation, this problem. She clearly believed that He could do something. That's the other thing. She knew He could do something about it. And Yeshua, He doesn't deny being able to do something about it. He only states that now is not the time for him to provide the wine. It's not his wedding, despite what Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code tried to say. Can you believe that was like more than 20, almost 20 years plus now? It's been so long since all of that became a big thing. It is not the time for Messiah's banquet. It's not the time for him to provide the wine. But that does not mean that he's not sympathetic to the situation at hand. He says in verse 5, his mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. She kind of put him on the spot. Now there was the 6 stone jars used for the Jewish ritual of purification, each holding 2 to 3 measures, and different translations may say something like 20 to 30 gallons. And Yeshua said to them, fill the jars with water. So they filled them up to the top. And then he said to them, take some water out and give it to the head waiter, the master of the banquet. And they brought it. So Miriam, she speaks with certainty that Yeshua is going to give some instruction that's going to help solve this problem of not having any wine. And those jars, they were there for the purification. They're there for the removal of that status of uncleanness. But Yeshua's time had not yet come, he had said. He could not raise the dead and prepare the best for the banquet because the uncleanness, the purification of sin has not happened yet. The sin still permeated the planet. The leaven had not been removed from the planet, had not been removed from humanity. What symbolized in the cleansing of the temple, where you're getting this stuff out of here. It does not belong here. Neither does sin. But that has not happened yet. So he cannot awaken the dead for that great banquet. So before the banquet can be prepared, before anyone can sit at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this uncleanness, this sin, must be atoned for. More than just covered for, temporarily, but must be removed. That's what makes, the suffering servant necessary before the coming of the great King. Yeshua had to come and redeem and cleanse us from sin before the banquet and all those best things could be enjoyed. But like Isaiah, he talks about, he's constantly reminding Judah of, while he's talking about all the decline, even while he's talking about all of the judgment that's coming their way, he doesn't want them to ever forget about that blessed and restored future. And neither did Yeshua. He didn't want this family struggling to provide for their wedding feast, the embarrassment of running out of wine, and nor any of us who've been reading this since to forget about that great future, to lose hope of the good things that are to come. And so it says in verse 9, now the head waiter did not know where it had come from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew. And as the head waiter tasted the water that had become wine, he calls the bridegroom and says to him, everyone brings out the good wine first. And whenever they are drunk, then the worst, when they're not going to notice it. But you have reserved the good wine until now. You have brought out the best wine now, at this time. That word best or good is kalos, which means beautiful, handsome, excellent, choice, surpassing, precious, or admirable. It's excellent in its nature and characteristics. It's well adapted to its goal or its purpose or its end. In other words, it's if you have something and it has a tool and it's made for a particular job, then it's the ideal thing to get that done. The wine that he provided is well adapted to what he was going to show them. The wine that he has provided is well adapted to the banquet at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It means beautiful by reason of purity of heart and life. It's praiseworthy. The first time you see this word when you look at the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the text, it's in Genesis chapter 1, verse 4, where it says, God saw the light, that it was good, perfectly adapted to its purpose and its function. It's also the word used in John chapter 10, where he says, I am the good shepherd, the ideal, the best shepherd that will ever exist. That's the kind of good wine that he is providing. The wine Yeshua provided for this wedding party was a glimpse of the wine that Isaiah was talking about, that aged wine, well refined. And it's the provision of the Messiah that they had been expecting for all those years, for those that are reclining at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the disciples knew it because it was a revealing, it was a showing something about his identity, about the glory that he had at his hand. He says, Yeshua did this, the first of the signs in Cana of the Galilee. And he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. And so when you think about it, what made this moment so powerful isn't really the changing of the water into wine, as great as that is, as amazing and unheard of as that is. Rather, what is making this moment so powerful is that this small party, this small wedding feast, is able to witness a fulfillment, a partial fulfillment, a glimpse of fulfillment of that expectation that only Messiah provides. They were able to see a glimpse of it in their day, fulfilled in their day, to taste the wine of the kingdom. Before that time has actually come. What do you think? Do you think any other glass of wine that they ever have for the rest of their lives, is it ever going to taste as good as that? No. Everything else that they have for the rest of their life is going to be, it's not as good as that. Nothing else will ever satisfy. Again, they will have with them that reminder of what is coming. So no matter how much the nation declines, how much the world sinks into lawlessness and destruction, the kingdom of Messiah is sure and certain. That's what this picture of the wine at the wedding feast is supposed to communicate. The Messiah is here, that Messiah is coming, that Messiah is going to share in that great banquet in the future. And Isaiah has much of the same goal in Isaiah chapter 26 about reminding this people after these almost 10 plus chapters of judgment on the various nations, including Jerusalem, including Israel and Judah. He says in chapter 26, verse 1, he says, in that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city, and he appoints salvation as its walls and ramparts. In that day, in the kingdom, when the mountain of God is exalted above the nation, that's when it's safe to say we have a strong city. You can't really say that until that day. Because what city is Isaiah talking about? He's talking about Jerusalem, right? In our day, in this world, now that we're here before the Messianic era, is the city of Jerusalem strong to the point that it will never be taken? No. History has proven that, right? It's been defeated multiple times. It's been destroyed, 586 BC. You had the temple destroyed 70 AD. You had the whole city destroyed 130 AD, right? The city is not unbeatable. But in that day, Yeshua will be its walls and its ramparts. Because that we have a strong city, he appoints Yeshua as its walls, salvation as its walls. That's that word in Hebrew. Y'all know that. Yeshua will ensure Jerusalem's defense and victory, and no enemy will ever be able to knock down or breach those defenses. To the point that he says, open the gates. We have this strong city. He appoints his salvation as its walls and ramparts. Open the gates. Let the righteous nation enter, one that keeps faith. This is where it kind of gets interesting for me in a lot of ways. So salvation is the walls and ramparts. Yeshua is the wall and ramparts, but there are gates. And it's gates that even when they are open, restrict who can come in and out. Even when the gates are open, is it still going to be a narrow way to get in? Yeah. It's not going to be a broad way. It's not going to be a gate without any restrictions or without any discernment. Because only the righteous nation enters, right? If you have a huge, broad gate, open gate into a city without any type of discernment of who's coming in and out, that's not a very smart design. Just kind of like we're having in our day, the whole debate about the open border, right? It's not a smart situation, because when you have a door that's completely open without any type of security or restriction, it doesn't just let in the ones that you want. It lets in the ones that you don't. The ones that'll actually want to destroy the city or the nation, that will want to corrupt things. But he says, let the righteous nation enter. When you look at that passage, how many nations are able to enter through these otherwise open gates? Is that a plural statement or is that a singular statement? It's singular. Only one nation is going to qualify. Only one nation is going to be able to enter. Only one nation that will truly keep the faith, that will truly trust fully and completely in the provision and promise of God who cut the covenant. What is that nation called? Is it called America, the United States? Is it the nation called, is it England? Is it the UN or anybody else? No, the one nation, the one righteous nation is Israel. Only the citizens of Israel are going to be going in and through those gates. The nation that is made from his chosen people, the nation that is made from those from the nations that have joined themselves to who? That have joined themselves to Israel, right? By faith in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. People, like the mixed multitude that left Egypt with them, like Zipporah and Jethro, like Rahab from Jericho, Ruth, the Moabitess, Uriah the Hittite. Even in the days of Esther, when you're reading that story of Purim and all of that, throughout every province and throughout every city wherever the king's edict and his law went, the Jews had gladness and joy, banquets and holidays, and many peoples of the land became Jews because the fear of the Jews had overcome them. Right? It's those who have joined themselves to that nation that are included. God has made a way for people not of the bloodline, but people from the nations to become citizens of his one nation. And it's the Messiah who accomplishes this. See, Israel was always supposed to be the light to the nations, to draw people to the Torah and faith in God, but they didn't always fulfill that role. The Messiah Yeshua came, he fulfills that role to its fullness because he is the ultimate example of what a light to the Gentile is supposed to be. Saving even the nations in the same way that Joseph saved the nation of Egypt and others around them by being rejected by his brothers and sent out. That's the suffering servant. In John chapter 1, verse 9, he says, "The true light coming into the world gives light to every man. He was in the world, and the world was made through him," the Word, "but the world did not know him. And he came to his own, but his own did not receive him." Right? He was rejected. But whoever did receive him, those trusting in his name, to these he gave the right to be called children of God. By faith, by trusting, by belief. It says, "They were born not of a bloodline, nor of human desire, nor of man's will, but of God." That's how we become part of the family. Believing in the salvation provided by Messiah makes a person a child of God in a way that transcends bloodline. If it was just on bloodline, we shouldn't be included at all. It doesn't negate the bloodline. But faith in his name makes a way for people from other nations to be included. Revelation 5, we sang about this. They are singing a new song saying, "You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, for you were slain, and by your blood you redeemed for God those from every tribe and tongue and people and nation." He made a way. And so the miracle, the mystery of God is how all these people from all these different nations, from all these different tribes and tongues and people and nation, it's how we are saved at all, how we are included at all. That's the mystery. That's the miracle of Messiah, this redemption of people from all these nations. It does not negate what Isaiah was just saying, where one nation enters through the gates. As verse 10 in that chapter, as verse 10 in Revelation 5 goes on, it says, "You have made them for our God a kingdom, and Kohanim, a priest, and they shall reign upon the earth." He has made all of these people, these tribes and tongues and groups. You have made them a kingdom. Again, is that plural or is that singular? Again, that's singular. They have made them a part of the kingdom of Israel, the one nation allowed to enter through the gates. And in talking about the walls of this strong city with salvation as its walls, with Yeshua as its walls, this new Jerusalem, the gates are identified this way in Revelation 21. She had a great high wall with 12 gates, and above the gates 12 angels, and on the gates were inscribed the names of the 12 tribes of Bnei Israel, of the children of Israel. The gates are named for the tribes. One nation enters, and you are counted among this nation, or the gates keep you out. And knowing this, makes that statement from Ephesians 2 that we read about every week all the more important. At that time, you, as coming out of the nations, you were separate from the Messiah, excluded from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of the promise, having no hope, and without God in the world. The gates may be open, but you're not getting in. But now, in Messiah Yeshua, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of the Messiah. He has made a way. So as he says, you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but you are fellow citizens with God's people and members of God's household. Right? Citizens of what? Of that commonwealth of Israel. Of members of God's household. By belief, you have been given the right to be called children of God. Most believers in Jesus, most believers in Yeshua don't appreciate the importance of citizenship being granted in the commonwealth of Israel by faith in Messiah. I know I didn't grow up thinking that was a big deal. My most important citizenship was being a United States citizen, right? That's what we're gung ho for. That's what I grew up in the '80s all about. Is that, man? We're the strongest out there, right? We're right about everything we do, right? And that kind of how the persona of the nation that we kind of grew up in. But that's not my most important citizenship anymore. It's this passage that's become more important to us because I want to enter that city. I want to go through those gates, don't you? And it's not going to be because I'm an American that I get to go in. I must be a citizen of the righteous nation following the righteous path. Isaiah 26, verse 7 says, "The way of the righteous is straight. Upright one, you make smooth the path of the righteous." We are led on the paths of righteousness, as Psalm 23 talks about. We are led on the paths of righteousness for his name's sake, right? And where do those paths take us? They take us to faith in Messiah, the goal of the Torah, to the gates of the city. Our way is made straight. We have a direct and clear path. And it's not because there aren't any other paths or any other options. But it's because when we have faith in him, those paths really don't become options for us anymore. We can't go just any way we feel like it or anything that we would like to do or want to do. We can't just go our own way and expect to end up in the same place. We have to now be on the righteous way, the path that he has made straight for us. We can really only go one way, and that's following the way, the voice of our shepherd. As Isaiah talks about multiple places there, he makes highways in the desert, from the wastelands, from the nations that lead his people who have been scattered. It leads them home to his city. And as they come, people from the nations come with them. Verse 15 in 26, he says, "You have increased the nation, Adonai. You have increased the nation. You are glorified as you have expanded all the borders of the land." The nation is, in that day when the Messianic era is coming, the nation is increased to finally fulfill the promise that was given all the way back to Abraham. You look at Genesis 15, and he says, "On that day, Adonai cut a covenant with Abram, saying, I give this land to your seed from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River." Now, if you've been watching the news anytime recently, is Israel going all the way to the Euphrates River? Anybody? No. You look up online about what that looks like, the greater Israel concept. There's various graphics that are out there trying to get us a sense of what that promise to Abraham and the kingdom in its fullness looks like. And that's a whole lot bigger than what they got now. There's various ways that you'll see it depicted. Going all the way over into the middle of Iraq, which is the Euphrates River, and there's some debate about what the river of Egypt actually is, whether it's the Nile or whether it's one of those that are right on the border of Sinai and such. So you'll see things like that. But still, that little yellow area on that one is roughly where they're at now. But the promise is a whole lot bigger than that. This is the true meaning of the phrase, from the river to the sea. This is that true meaning. From the Euphrates River to the Mediterranean, Israel, the kingdom of God is going to be free under the rule of Messiah. And all this talk that you hear on the news, that you hear other people talking about from the river to the sea, that's the enemy, that's the accuser, that's Satan coming to try and copy and steal and lie and counterfeit what God has said and what he wants to do. He does that a lot, doesn't he? The enemy counterfeits and lies about what God has said, and he always has. Satan wants to take the promise for himself and for those who are aligned with him. So anybody who is saying from the river to the sea, and what they mean is removing Israel, is only parroting Satan when he said, did God really say? Right? They are under the influence of the dragon from Revelation 12 that wants to essentially kill the woman Israel, who's clothed in the sun, in order to stop the arrival of Messiah, the one who is coming to crush his head. That's what they mean. They're aligning with Satan's agenda in saying that statement. So he is expanding the border. But that expanding of the land is not just about territory, it's about people. That word, increase. That word increase that's in that passage means to add, to increase, or do something again. A later definition talks about to adding to, as in terms of joining, or to join oneself and be added to. Right? That should sound familiar. That's the kind of language. But you have been brought near. You have been added to the blood of Messiah. The first time that word is used is of Eve in Genesis chapter 4, verse 2. She had one son already, but then again, she was added to her. She had another son named Abel. You read in Genesis, it says the tent of Shem is expanded to include Japheth, and according to Genesis 9, we've already seen from Isaiah 11 that the root of Jesse, the Messiah, will cause the nations to seek him. So it's more than just land and territory and borders. It's about people. He says it will also come about in that day that the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. The nations will seek for him, and his resting place will be glorious. So that the righteous nation will have many added to it, and the borders will be expanded to make room for all of that increase. You have increased the nation, Adonai. You have increased the nation. You are glorified as you have expanded all the borders of the land. Again, he will be glorified when all of this comes to pass, when all of this promise in that day, when his kingdom is truly set up the way it's supposed to be, and it hasn't happened yet. This is a day and a time in the future. When you think about one reason, one contributing factor, one thing that has been a part of why it hasn't happened so far, Israel has not always completed or fulfilled her calling, her purpose for the world of being the light to the nations. He says in verse 17, this is a very interesting analogy that's used here. He says, as a pregnant woman about to give birth writhes and cries out in her pain, so we were before you, Adonai. We have been with child. We have been in pain, yet we gave birth to wind. We are accomplishing no deliverance for the earth, nor are inhabitants of the world coming to life. It's needs to be said, or it doesn't need to be said, but the Israelites have experienced labor, hardship, and suffering, right? They have endured more persecution. They've been hated by the world longer than any other group. They're hated by the world because they are in relationship with the one true God, because they are chosen instruments of God, because he has used them in building up to the delivery of the Messiah, the coming of Messiah. But at this point in Isaiah's day, Messiah has not come. The goal has not been accomplished. They gave birth to the wind. There's no deliverance for the earth, the inhabitants of the world, not just Israel, but everybody. They are not coming to life. They are not experiencing the abundant life, the freedom in the Torah, where they are experiencing God's rule, where their sin has been dealt with and removed. They've not yet, the Jewish people, they've not yet fulfilled their purpose of being the light to the Gentiles. But a child will come from them that will accomplish that purpose and deliverance for the earth. A child that will bring the inhabitants of the world to life. And thankfully, we're on this side of all of that. We're on this side. We're living in a day when we can see that continuing, when that happening. It's not finished yet. But more have yet to come to life. The fullness has not yet been brought in. The fullness of the Gentiles, as Paul talks about, has not yet come in. There's not enough of Jew and Gentile that have accepted Messiah, the Word made flesh that tabernacled among us. But that's what's coming. There is going to be deliverance for the earth. There are going to be the inhabitants of the world coming to life. That will happen. And in considering all of that, once again, it's fascinating to look at the Targums, those Aramaic translations, that commentary that they provide, this time from Isaiah. It's fascinating because of who Isaiah identifies in these Targums as the one that they put their faith in. You'll remember that the Targums often use the idea of the Word or the Memra to describe the aspect of God that is acting, that's interacting with the world, with people. In Genesis, we read, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We all know that phrase, right? Well, the Targums put it like this: from the beginning with wisdom, the Memra, the Word of the Lord, created and perfected the heavens and the earth. And the Memra, or the Word of the Lord, said, "Let there be light," and there was light by His Word, by His Memra. These are all things that were in the Aramaic language. It was orally passed down after their time in Babylon and such. It was written down in the age or in the era of Yeshua and afterwards. But this is how, when they would read from the Torah, when they would read from the Hebrew, and then they had to explain it to all those people who didn't speak Hebrew, this is what they would hear. It is the Word that speaks, and it's the Word that is the source of the light. So the Word speaks, "Let there be light," and there was light by His Memra, His Word. What's interesting, it's also the Word that even does the resting on Shabbat. In chapter 2, verse 3, it says, "On the seventh day, the Word of the Lord completed His work." The Memra of the Lord completed His work which He had created, and there was the Sabbath. It's the Memra, it's the Word that establishes the covenants. Following the flood in Noah's day, the Targum goes on and says, "And I will establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall not again be consumed by the waters of a deluge, nor shall there be again a deluge to destroy the earth. And the Lord said, This is the sign of the covenant which I appoint between my word," the Memra, "and between you, and between every living soul that is with you unto perpetual generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between my word and between the earth." Again, that's the Aramaic translation of things. The covenant goes on with Abraham. It says, "After these things the word of the Lord came to Abram in prophecy, saying, Fear not, Abram, my word," Memra, "shall be thy strength and thy exceeding great reward." So it's the one that he identifies as the word that is their reward. He says, "And he believed in the word of the Lord," the Memra Dayeah, I'm probably saying that poorly, "and he reckoned it to him unto righteousness," unto justification. He believed in the word. So it's the Memra, it's the word that redeems the people of Israel. In Deuteronomy 32, he says, "When the word of the Lord shall be revealed to redeem his people. He shall say to all the nations, see now that I am he who is and was, and I am he who will be in the future. And he, by his word, will make atonement for the sins of his land and of his people. So when John comes along in John chapter 1 and says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, this is the understanding that they had for what that meant. And the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us, right? It's the Targums, when you look at the Targum of Isaiah, the Aramaic translation of Isaiah, that the Memra is also the direction of faith. In 26 verse 2, the blue is the rendition of Memra in there. He says, in a perfect heart they shall preserve peace. Peace shall be wrought for them because they have trusted in thy word. In verse 3 it goes on, it says, trust ye in the word of the Lord forever and ever. Thus ye shall be saved by the word, who is the fear of the Lord, the mighty one, to eternity. Trust in the word, the memra, forever. He is the fear of the Lord, which is a very interesting phrase. It's very similar to what we read a couple of weeks ago in Isaiah 11, with that sevenfold manifestation of the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, described as that spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord, and he shall bring him to fear of the Lord. And you look at the Targum of Isaiah 11, and I couldn't find it when we were looking at that passage at the time. Isaiah 11:1 says, and a king shall come forth from the sons of Jesse, and from his children's children the Messiah shall be anointed. So there's no question of who they understood this Isaiah 11 passage is talking about. And for the Jewish people who were, when the Aramaic was being passed along and written down, they were a people occupied by Rome when these were all being developed, who were awaiting the arrival of Messiah in their day, right? Then Isaiah 26:13 from the Targums is very important. He says, O Lord our God, the nations have had dominion over us, being lords over us besides thee, but we trust in thy word, and we praise thy name. We trust in thy word, and we praise thy name. What was that passage that we read from John earlier? Well, not that one, but also in John chapter 1. Whoever did receive him, those trusting in his name, to these he gave the right to become children of God. He's talking about the Word that is made flesh and tabernacling with us. We trust in thy word. The next verse, verse 14, is actually also very interesting. It does not mention memra or the word, but it says something very interesting about the people of the nations. You know, the ones that they look up to. You know, we have, you think about in the United States, there's the founding fathers, right? There's those people from the past that were like, oh wow, those people, they were amazing, right? They were so much smarter than we are. We look up to them, and what did they say about things? We kind of elevate them and think of them as the heroes of the nation and such. Well, what's interesting in verse 14 in the Targum is perhaps revealing something about their expectation of what the Jewish people were expecting at the time for Messiah. But he says, they, talking about the nations, they worship idols who do not live. They're heroes who shall not rise. Therefore, when thou shalt visit their sins, thou wilt make an end of them and make all memorial of them to perish. So the heroes of the nations do not rise. And what eventually happens to all the people, all the heroes from the past, right? Don't they all die at some point? But what separates the Messiah from all those other heroes? The one that they have been waiting for, the Jewish people, he's not going to be a hero that ends in death like all the others. He's going to be one who rises. He will rise to be the bridegroom at the banquet when his time comes. He is going to be the one who lavishly provides the best food and wine, and all those who trust in him will be there to recline at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The hero of the Jewish people, the Messiah, does not end in death, but life and resurrection and awakening. And he is the Word made flesh, in whom we put our trust, who believe in his name. And when we do that, we are given the right to be called children of God. We are given a citizenship in the commonwealth of Israel as his people. And that's what we've got to be in order to go through the gates of the city. Amen.